One day, before my son's birthday, he looked me dead in the eye and told me that the best gift I could ever give him would be my death. The very next day, I canceled the mortgage on the house that was in my name, emptied our joint account, and vanished from his life forever. What I left on his kitchen table that evening destroyed him completely, but it finally set me free from a prison I had built with my own hands. My name is Elias Vancroft. I am 68 years old. I am a retired civil engineer, and I spent 42 years of my life raising skyscrapers, bridges, and commercial plazas here in Chicago. I came from Birmingham, Alabama, when I was just a boy, carrying a cardboard suitcase and a dream of studying at a real university. I made it happen. I graduated from the University of Illinois. I worked for some of the biggest construction firms in the country. I oversaw projects that now have the names of billionaire CEOs plastered across their facades. But those buildings were raised with my sweat, my expertise, and my sleepless nights spent calculating reinforced concrete structures. I married Lorraine when I was 26. She was a math teacher. I met at a campus dance. We had one child, Tyson. He was born when I was 32. And from the moment of his first cry, I swore I would give him everything I never had. A top-tier education, a comfortable home, and absolute security. Lorraine passed away 8 years ago, taken by a sudden stroke that stole her in a matter of hours. After that, Tyson became my entire world, the only reason I bothered to get out of bed every morning. I worked until I was 63, saving every spare penny. I was never a man for luxury. My car was a 2008 Chevy Impala that crossed the city back and forth without a single complaint. My clothes were simple, my meals were home-cooked, and every extra cent I earned went straight into my son's future. I paid for his private business degree. I provided the down payment for his apartment when he wanted to move out. I co-signed on loans he would never have had the credit to get on his own. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was building a solid foundation for his life. But the truth I realized much too late, was that I was raising a man who learned to see me not as a father, but as an ATM, a sponsor, someone who existed only to solve his problems and open a wallet. It was a day in September, exactly 24 hours before Tyson's 36th birthday, when it all came crashing down. I had bought a bottle of fine imported red wine, the kind you save for a special occasion, and I decided to stop by his apartment to hand it to him in person. I wanted to see my son, hug him, and tell him how proud I was. I wanted to feel like we were still a family. When he opened the door and saw me standing there, with that gift-wrapped bottle and a smile on my face, his expression was one of pure annoyance, as if I were some persistent telemarketer. But I walked in anyway, because a father shouldn't need an invitation to visit his son. Or so I thought. And there, in that living room, filled with expensive electronics and new furniture I didn't even know he'd bought, my son stabbed a knife into my chest. Not a metal one, but one made of words. I was born in 1957 in a working-class neighborhood in Birmingham. My father, Mr. Juwan Vancroft, was a machinist in a steel mill, who came home every night with grease-stained hands and tired shoulders. My mother, Ms. Carmen, was a seamstress who took in laundry and altered prom dresses for the wealthy ladies on the other side of town. And we were poor, but we never went hungry. We had our dignity. I grew up watching my father fix things. He had a way with tools and infinite patience for understanding how things worked. From him, I inherited a curiosity for structures for understanding how things stay standing, how weight is distributed, and how one piece fits into another. When I was about 12, he took me to see a new office building being built downtown. I was mesmerized watching those men walk across steel beams, calculating distances, raising walls, out of nothing. I went home and told my mother, "I'm going to be an engineer." She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh that discouraged me. She laughed with pride and hope, and she told me, "Then study, son. Study hard, because that is the one thing no one can ever take away from you." And I studied. I studied like a man possessed. I would wake up at 5 in the morning to review my notes before school. At night, after helping my father in the makeshift workshop in the backyard, I would stay up late solving physics and calculus problems by the light of a single lamp, because the power in our neighborhood was weak and flickered out constantly. I got into the university in 1976 when I was 19 years old. My parents sold my mother's sewing machine just to help me with my expenses in Chicago. I will never forget that sacrifice. I arrived in the city with that cardboard suitcase I mentioned, one change of clothes, and $200 in my pocket. I lived in a boarding house on the south side, sharing a room with 3 other boys from down south, all of us trying to make it in the big city. I worked as an assistant in an accounting firm by day and studied by night. Those 5 years were hard, but they were the years that molded me. I learned that nothing falls from the sky, that success is sweat, it is endurance, it is getting up the next morning even when your body is screaming for rest. I graduated in 1981. I started at a mid-sized construction company, doing budgets and overseeing small sites. My first project was a warehouse renovation in Naperville. I remember the smell of fresh cement to this day, the roar of the mixers, the feeling of seeing something take shape based on my own calculations. It was magic. Within 2 years, I was coordinating teams. In 5, I was supervising major builds. I worked on high-rises in the Loop, commercial buildings on the Magnificent Mile, and overpasses that still carry the weight of this massive city. My routine was grueling. I'd wake up at 5:30, grab a quick coffee, and take the train to the sites. I'd spend the whole day in the dirt and the wind, checking structures, solving problems, negotiating with vendors, and guiding the crews. I'd get home after 7 in the evening, covered in dust and concrete powder, but I was satisfied. It was honest work. Every building I helped raise was proof that the machinist's son had made something of himself. It was at a University of Illinois dance in 1983 that I met Lorraine. She had just finished her math degree and was teaching at a public high school. She was beautiful in a simple, natural way. She had a wide smile and a loud laugh that could fill any room. We talked all night. She told me about the challenges of teaching in the inner city. I told her about the chaos of the construction sites. 3 months later, I asked her to be my girl. 2 years after that, we were married. Our life was modest, but happy. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental in Bronzeville. Lorraine worked the morning shift. I worked all day. At night, we ate together and talked about our plans for the future. She wanted children, many of them, and so did I. But life only gave us one, Tyson, born in 1989. The birth was difficult. Lorraine had complications and was in the hospital for nearly a week. The doctors said it would be too risky to try for another. So we poured all our love and all our energy into that one boy with the big eyes and the loud cry. Tyson became our world. I worked twice as hard to give him comfort. I bought our first home when he was 5, a 3-bedroom house in the same neighborhood, but this time it was ours. I put him in the best schools I could afford. Lorraine left her full-time job to focus on him during his early years. Later, she went back to work part-time, but Tyson was always the priority. The sacrifices were many, but I made them gladly. I remember one year, Tyson must have been about 12, and he desperately wanted a new gaming console. It was expensive, almost an entire month's salary for me. I took on an extra project on the weekends, supervising a club renovation. I spent 2 months giving up my family Sundays just to see his smile when he opened that gift. And he did smile, but it didn't last long. Within a few weeks, the console was forgotten, and he wanted something else. When Tyson hit his teenage years, the first signs that something was wrong started to appear. He was demanding and impatient. He wanted designer sneakers, expensive clothes, and to go to parties in places I wouldn't have even dreamed of visiting at his age. Lorraine tried to balance it out. She said we needed to teach him limits, but I always gave in. I thought I was making up for my absences, for the days I spent on the sites, for the nights I got home too late to have dinner with them. I thought giving things was the same as giving love. Tyson graduated with a business degree from a private university that cost me a fortune. It was 4.5 years of tuition that weighed heavily on our budget, but I never complained. When he graduated in 2011, I expected him to go out and look for work, to start building his own life. But he had other ideas. He wanted to start his own business. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. I asked him to gain some experience first, to work at a company and learn how the market worked. He told me I was old-fashioned. He said the world had changed, that I didn't understand anything about startups or innovation. He tried 3 different businesses in 5 years. None of them worked. I financed every single one. An online clothing store that went bust in 6 months, a delivery app that never got off the ground, and a consulting firm that existed only as a name on a rented office space that I paid for. With every failure, he would come back home, and I would start all over again. I paid off his debts, calmed his creditors, and rebuilt his hope. In 2015, Lorraine started complaining of severe headaches. We thought it was just work stress. One Sunday morning, she collapsed in the kitchen. I rushed her to the hospital. The doctors did a scan and found a brain aneurysm that had ruptured. It was a massive, fatal stroke. She went into a coma and passed away 2 days later. She was only 54. My world collapsed. Tyson cried at the funeral, but just weeks later, he was asking for money again. He needed rent for his place. He needed money for a used car. He needed money to invest in a new business idea. I, still reeling from the loss of Lorraine, gave it to him. I always gave it, because he was all I had left. And I was terrified of losing him too. In 2018, he said he wanted to move into his own place for good. He was 29 years old. He thought it was time and to have his own apartment, but he had no credit, no steady job, and nothing the bank would accept as collateral. So I put down the deposit for a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice part of town. I put it in my name. I took on the mortgage, but I let him live there. I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought I was investing in his future and believing that one day he would take over the payments. I co-signed for everything else: credit cards, small personal loans. I opened a joint emergency account because he always said he needed a safety net. I deposited money every month. He withdrew it every month. I believed that was how you loved a son. by giving everything, solving everything, being the father, the mother, the bank, and the crutch. Until that day in September 2024, one day before his birthday, when I discovered that I had done everything wrong. I had raised not a son, but a parasite. And deep down, he was only waiting for one thing from me, my death. In the months leading up to that fateful day, I had noticed changes in Tyson. He was more distant, sharper. When I spoke to him, he answered in a hurry. He'd say he was busy and that we'd talk later. That later never came. I had to call him again and again, and even then, the conversations were short, cold, and purely functional. He only sought me out when he needed money, and that was happening with alarming frequency. In July, 2 months before the final straw, I stopped by his apartment without calling first. I rang the bell several times until he finally opened the door in a robe, looking like he'd just woken up. It was noon. The living room was a disaster. Empty bottles everywhere. Leftover food on the coffee table. A thick smell of smoke in the air. I was shocked. I had never seen my son like this. "What's up, Pop?" he asked, not even inviting me in. "I came to see how you were doing, son. We haven't had a real talk in a while," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He sighed, as if I were a heavy burden, and stepped aside to let me in. I sat on the couch, moving a few bottles out of the way. Tyson stood there with his arms crossed, waiting for me to speak. "Are you okay, Tyson? Are you working on anything?" I asked cautiously. "I'm moving some projects around, Pop. Nothing concrete yet, but I have some meetings lined up," he said, not looking me in the eye. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he lied to his mother about his grades in school. I felt a knot in my chest, but I didn't want to confront him. Not then. "If you need help, I'm here. I've always been here," I told him. "I know, Pop," he replied with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I left there with a bad feeling, as if I were losing my son bit by bit and didn't know how to reach him. I tried calling in the following days. He wouldn't answer. I sent him texts. His replies were dry and one-worded. "I'm fine. Talk later. Busy now." In August, I got a call from the bank manager. He wanted to confirm if I was aware that the joint account I kept with Tyson was overdrawn. I was confused. I deposited money religiously every month. I always kept a reserve there. "How can it be negative, Mr. Vancroft?" "There have been several large withdrawals in the last few weeks. The account is $720 in the red," the manager explained. My blood ran cold. $720 negative. Tyson had taken everything and then used the overdraft without telling me. I called him immediately. He answered on the 5th ring. "Tyson, what is going on with the joint account?" I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. "Oh, Pop, sorry about that. I had some unexpected expenses." "I'll put it back. Relax," he said, his voice completely unconcerned. "Unexpected? How, son? $720? I insisted. "Pop, I'm not going to give you an itemized receipt for every cent I spend. It's a joint account, remember? I have a right to use it too." His voice turned hard and impatient. "But I deposit that money for emergencies, Tyson. For when you truly need it," I said, feeling my frustration grow. "And I needed it, Pop. Don't you trust me?" He shot back. I went silent. The truth was, I was starting not to trust him, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I just muttered that it was fine, that I would cover the negative balance, and I hung up. I covered it like I always did. I deposited the $720 plus another $180 as a buffer, and I tried to ignore the voice in my head screaming that I was being used. Then came September 14th, 2024. A Friday. The next day, Saturday, would be Tyson's 36th birthday. I had bought that bottle of wine, a fine Argentine Malbec that cost me $54, saved especially for an occasion like this. I wrapped it carefully. I wrote a card wishing him happiness, telling him he was my pride and my joy. I still believed that, you know? I still wanted to believe it. I arrived at his apartment around 6 in the evening. I rang the bell. He took a long time to answer. When he opened the door, he had that look of annoyance I knew so well, but I forced on a smile and walked in. "Hey, son, I came to bring you an early birthday gift," I said, holding out the bottle. He took it without enthusiasm, glanced at it, and set it on the table. "Thanks, Pop," he said, devoid of emotion. I looked around the living room. There was a massive TV, at least 70 inches, that hadn't been there the last time I visited. A powerful sound system in the corners, a new leather sofa, a glass dining table with upholstered chairs, all of it expensive, all of it brand new. My stomach turned. "Did you buy new furniture?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I did. I needed to refresh the place," he replied, checking his phone and paying me no attention. "With what money, Tyson?" The question was out before I could stop myself. He looked up from his phone, staring at me with an expression of pure irritation. "That's none of your business, Pop," he said sharply. "It is my business if you're using the credit card I co-signed for, or if you're counting on the money from the joint account I maintain," I replied, feeling my anger start to boil. Tyson let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Oh, here we go. The same old story. I pay for this, I maintain that. Don't you get tired of throwing everything you do in my face?" he said, raising his voice. "I'm not throwing anything in your face, Tyson. I just want to understand," I said, my own voice rising. "Understand what, Pop? That I'm tired of living like a peasant? That I deserve nice things too?" he yelled. "Peasant? Tyson, you live in an apartment I paid for. You drive a car I put the down payment on. You have a bank account I keep full. What kind of peasant life is that?" I exploded. All the accumulated frustration was coming out at once. He took a step toward me, his face red. "And do you know why you do all that, Pop? Because you feel guilty. Guilty for never being around, for choosing the construction sites, the clients, and the projects over your family. You buy my love because you don't know how to earn it any other way." His words were knives. I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. I lost my breath for a second. When I finally managed to speak, my voice was trembling. "I worked my entire life for you, Tyson. Everything I did was to give you a better life," I said, my eyes burning. "Well then, congratulations, Pop. Mission accomplished. Now let me live my life," he said, his voice ice cold. We stood in silence for a few seconds that felt like hours. I looked at the man my son had become, and I didn't recognize him. I saw no gratitude, no love, not even a shred of respect. That was when he spoke again, a twisted smile on his lips, as if he were making a barroom joke. "Do you know what the best birthday gift you could ever give me would be, Pop?" I looked at him, still trying to process everything. Still hoping this was a nightmare I was about to wake up from. "What, son?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your death," he said without blinking. The world stopped. My heart stopped. My breathing stopped. He continued as if he were discussing the dinner menu. "Seriously, think about it. With the life insurance you have, plus the inheritance, plus this apartment being in my name, I could finally live well." No more depending on crumbs. No more having to listen to you complain all the time. It would be perfect. His voice was calm, rational, as if he were performing a business analysis. I felt the tears welling up, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not in front of him. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. "Are you being serious?" I managed to ask, still in disbelief. "Totally. I'm not wishing for your death in a mean way, like wanting you to get hit by a bus tomorrow. But I don't know. If it happened naturally soon, it would be convenient for everyone. You wouldn't have to carry the weight of supporting me anymore, and I would finally be free." He shrugged, as if he'd said the most normal thing in the world. My entire body shook with rage, with sadness, with a pain so deep I didn't even know it existed. I looked at this man, this stranger who was once my baby boy, whom I had rocked in my arms, whom I'd taught to ride a bike, whom I'd stayed up with in the middle of the night when he had a fever. And I felt nothing more. I stood up slowly from the chair, grabbed my keys, and looked at him one last time. "All right, Tyson." That was all I could say. I walked out of the apartment without looking back. I took the stairs. I didn't want to wait for the elevator. I got into my car, and it was only once I closed the door, only there, inside, that I let the tears fall. I cried like I hadn't cried since Lorraine's funeral. I cried for the ingratitude. I cried for the son I had lost. I cried for the years of sacrifice that meant nothing. I cried for the illusion I had built that had just come crumbling down. But in the midst of the tears, something changed. A cold clarity began to take hold of me. A decision formed. I wasn't going to die to make my son's life easier, but I was going to die to him. Symbolically, I was going to disappear from his life, and he was going to learn the hardest way possible what it meant to lose the father he had. I got home that night and didn't sleep a wink. I stayed in the living room with the lights off, thinking, calculating, planning. I remembered every clause, every contract I had signed, every document I had stored away, every legal and technical detail that I, as an engineer who dealt with contracts and bureaucracy my whole life, knew by heart. Tyson had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had underestimated his father. He thought I was just a foolish old man, a walking bank, someone who existed to serve. But I was Elias Vancroft, son of a machinist, a graduate of the University of Illinois, a man who built skyscrapers with his own hands and mind, and I was not going to let this insult pass. The next morning, Saturday, his birthday, I woke up with a purpose. I showered and dressed calmly, had my coffee while thinking through every step, and then I began to execute the plan I had architected during the night. I called the bank manager, the same one who had warned me about the overdraft. I scheduled an urgent meeting for Monday morning. Then I called my lawyer, Mr. Atticus Sterling, an old acquaintance from my construction days who had helped on me with several contracts. I scheduled another meeting for Monday. I had much to do and little time, but first I needed to confirm something. I went back to Tyson's apartment. He wasn't there this time. I used the spare key I still had. After all, the property was in my name. I went straight to his desk. I opened drawers, searched through documents and bills, and I found piles upon piles of credit card statements, all with astronomical balances. Purchases at electronics stores, expensive restaurants, bars, trips, all on the card I was the co-signer for. He had blown past the limit. He owed more than $40,000, and I, as the co-signer, was legally responsible for that debt. I also found statements from the joint account. He hadn't just taken the $720 I knew about, but other amounts in the months before. He had drained the account repeatedly. And even worse, I found a contract for a loan he had taken out using the apartment as collateral. My apartment, which was in my name, he had forged my signature. I felt the rage rise again, but this time it was a cold, calculated rage. I took photos of everything with my phone, organized the evidence, and left there more determined than ever. I spent the rest of the weekend locked in my house, organizing documents, calling old contacts, and preparing everything down to the smallest detail. Tyson tried to call me twice on Sunday. I didn't answer. He sent a text, "Pop, about yesterday we need to talk." I didn't reply. Monday morning, 7:30, I was already at the bank. The manager received me in his office, looking worried. "Mr. Vancroft, what can I do for you?" "I want to close the joint account I have with my son." I went straight to the point. He blinked, surprised, but being the professional he was, he just nodded. "And I also want to pay off the mortgage on the apartment that is in my name. I have savings that cover the amount. Can you arrange that?" "Yes, I can, sir. But may I ask the reason for this decision?" he ventured. "Personal reasons," I replied, and said no more. In 2 hours, it was all resolved. The joint account was closed, and the mortgage was paid off. The apartment, which legally had always been mine, was now debt-free and entirely in my name, with no link to Tyson whatsoever. From the bank, I went straight to Mr. Sterling's office. Atticus greeted me with a warm handshake. "Elias, it's been a long time. Sit down and tell me what brings you here," he said warmly. I told him everything, every detail. Tyson's words, the debts, the forged signature, all of it. Atticus grew serious as I spoke. "Elias, what your son did, forging your signature on a loan contract, that's a crime. You could press charges," he said gravely. "I don't want to press charges. I want to cut him out of my life and my inheritance." "Is that possible?" I asked. Atticus thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, you can disinherit him based on the evidence you have. Grave ingratitude, verbal abuse, and the unauthorized use of your assets. A judge would uphold it. I'll draft the documents." "How long will it take?" 2 days to draft, and about a week to register and make it official," he replied. "Then do it, and include a clause that in the event of my death, my assets go to charity." "I don't want him to see a single cent," I said firmly. Atticus looked me in the eye, saw that I was resolved, and agreed. I left his office with a strange sensation. It wasn't relief. It wasn't victory. It felt like I had signed the death certificate of a part of myself, the part that was Tyson's father. But it was necessary. It was justice. In the days that followed, while Atticus prepared the paperwork, I discovered something that would change the game completely. Something I wasn't even looking for, but that fell into my hands by fate. It was Wednesday. I had gone to a bakery near my old neighborhood, one I'd frequented for years, where I knew everyone. I was having a coffee when Mr. Gable, a retired mason who had worked with me on several sites, sat at my table. "How you doing, Elias? Long time no see," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Gable? Doing well, my friend," I replied, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. We talked about life, the old days on the job, and retirement, until he mentioned something without knowing the weight of his words. "Ah, Elias, I saw your son the other day. That Tyson boy. He was at a fancy steakhouse downtown with a whole crowd, spending big by the looks of it." He laughed without malice. My heart raced. "When was that, Gable?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "About 3 weeks ago, give or take. I was walking by and saw him through the window. I was surprised because that place is expensive. But I thought, Elias's boy must be doing well for himself. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Tyson had asked me for $360 to pay a supposedly overdue electric bill and a doctor's visit. I had given it to him, of course, and he had used it to pay for an expensive dinner with friends. Do you remember what day it was, Gable? I pressed. He thought for a second. I think it was a Friday, August 23rd. I remember because it was my granddaughter's birthday. Exactly 1 week after he asked me for the money. I felt the indignation grow, but I thanked Gable and left with an idea in my head. I went home and called Atticus Sterling. Atticus, I need a private investigator. Someone discreet and professional. What for, Elias? He asked, curious. I need proof. Photos, evidence of how my son is spending the money he borrows from me under false pretenses, I explained. Atticus was silent for a moment. I have a contact, an excellent professional. I'll send you his number. The next day, I was sitting in a cafe with a private investigator, a man in his 50s named Julian Thorne. I explained the situation. I showed him the messages where Tyson asked for money, claiming medical emergencies and unpaid bills. I asked him to tail my son for a week and document everything. I want to know where he goes, who he's with, and how much he spends. I need photos, videos, and receipts, I told him. Julian nodded professionally. It'll be $540 for the week's work. Can you start today? I replied without hesitation. It was the best decision I ever made. In 5 days, Julian handed me a complete dossier. Photos of Tyson in high-end bars, sophisticated restaurants, and clubs. Videos of him buying designer clothes and picking up the tab for rounds of drinks for his friends. Arriving in luxury Ubers at places that cost a college tuition just to enter. All while he was telling me he was struggling and needed help with basic expenses. But the icing on the cake was something else. Julian had managed to record a conversation between Tyson and a friend at a bar from a distance. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but you could hear him clearly. Man, my old man is a gold mine. I tell him I'm struggling, and he drops the cash instantly. Doesn't even ask questions. Tyson's voice, laughing. For real, he doesn't suspect anything? The friend asked. He doesn't suspect a thing. He's old, getting a bit senile. And he feels guilty because he worked so much when I was a kid. I milk that for all it's worth. The more drama I make, the more he gives, Tyson replied, between bouts of laughter. When I heard that, something broke inside me forever. It wasn't rage anymore. It was a disappointment so profound, so absolute, that it didn't even hurt. It was just nothingness. A void. I took all the material Julian gave me, added it to the moments I already had, and took it all to Atticus. He analyzed it and shook his head in disapproval. Elias, with this, you can not only disinherit your son, but you could also sue him for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. This young man needs a severe lesson, Atticus said, indignant. I don't want to sue him. I don't want to see my son in prison. But I want him to feel the weight of the consequences, I replied. Then let's do this. Atticus opened a folder on his desk. I'm finalizing the disinheritance today. You sign at the notary tomorrow. And we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to officially notify all the lenders that you are canceling your cosigner status on every contract you signed for him. The debts still exist, But now, they are his problem alone. Can you do that? I asked. Yes, I'll cite the proven forgery and bad faith. No judge will question it, he guaranteed. On Friday, a week and a day after that fateful birthday, everything was ready. The disinheritance was signed and registered, the cancellation notices were sent, the joint account was closed, and the apartment was fully paid off and in my name, with no legal tie to Tyson. Only one thing was missing: the letter. I sat at my kitchen table, took a pen and paper, and wrote by hand. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. It was clear, direct, and final. Tyson, you said the best birthday gift would be my death. I've decided to grant your wish in part. As of today, I am dead to you, symbolically, legally, and permanently. The apartment where you live is paid off and remains in my name. You have 30 days to vacate. There is no point in taking this to court. Every clause is in my favor. The joint account has been closed. It no longer exists. My status as a cosigner on your contracts has been canceled. The debts you accumulated are now yours, and yours alone. The companies have already been notified and will begin collecting from you directly. You have been officially and legally disinherited. When I do pass away, and I hope it takes a long time, you will not receive a single cent. My assets will be donated to charities that, unlike you, do some good in this world. You thought I was old, senile, and easy to manipulate. You thought my death would be convenient, that it would solve your life. You forgot that I am an engineer, that I spent my life reading contracts, understanding laws, and building solid structures. I dismantled your little life of lies with the same precision I used to design a building. Do not look for me. Do not call. Do not show up. For all legal and personal purposes, you have ceased to be my son. Signed, Elias Vancroft, the man you called Pop. I folded the letter carefully. I put it inside an envelope, along with 3 copies. One of the disinheritance, one of the apartment's title, and one of the co-signer cancellation. That afternoon, I went to the apartment. One last time, I used my key. Tyson wasn't there. I left the envelope in the center of the living room table, impossible to miss, and beside it, I left my key. That would be the last time I ever stepped foot in there. I walked out and closed the door. I felt as if I had closed an entire chapter of my life. Painful, necessary, and liberating. I spent that weekend packing my things. I called a real estate agent and put my house on the market. I started looking at small coastal towns, quiet, affordable places where I could live in peace on my pension. I wanted nothing more to do with Chicago, with that life, or with those memories. It was Monday when my phone exploded. It was 8 in the morning when the calls started. Tyson, once, twice, 10, 20 times. I didn't answer a single one. Then came the texts, hundreds of them. Pop, please answer. We need to talk. You can't do this to me. I'll be out on the street. Pop, answer me. You're joking, right? This is illegal. I'll sue you. Give me at least some time to get organized, Pop. Please, I'm your son. I blocked the number, but he started calling from other phones. Friends, probably. I blocked them all. He tried to email me. I marked them as spam. He showed up at the building where I lived. The doorman, on my instructions, didn't let him up. 2 days later, I got a call from Atticus. Elias, your son hired a lawyer. They're claiming emotional abandonment. They wanted to overturn the disinheritance. Can they? I asked calmly. No. We have too much evidence. His statement about about wishing for your death, the proof of bad faith, the forged documents. No judge will side with him, but be prepared, because the process could be emotionally draining. Atticus warned. Let it be. I'm ready, I replied. And I was. Because for the first time in decades, I had done something for myself. I had put myself first. I had chosen my dignity over the illusion of being a good father to someone who didn't deserve it. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Tyson tried everything. He threatened, he pleaded, he used emotional blackmail. He sent mutual acquaintances to try and convince me to forgive him. He spread distorted versions of the story, painting me as a cruel father who abandoned his son in his time of need. Some people believed him. Others, when I showed them the proof, understood. The eviction from the apartment was carried out within the deadline. Tyson tried to get an injunction, but the judge denied it. On the appointed day, he had to move his things out. I heard from others that it was humiliating. The expensive furniture being carried out while the neighbors watched. The credit card companies began collecting from him directly. Without my backing as a cosigner, his credit plummeted. The friends he had treated at expensive restaurants and bars vanished the moment they realized the well had run dry. I sold my house in Chicago for a fair price. With the money, I bought a small house in Hilton Head, South Carolina, right on the coast. In 2 bedrooms, a deck with a view of the ocean, and a small backyard where I planted tomatoes and peppers. Simple, perfect. And for the first time in 8 years since Lorraine died, I slept in peace. Today, 3 months after all that, I wake up every day to the sound of waves crashing on the beach. I make my coffee, sit on the deck, and look out at the horizon. Life here in Hilton Head is simple. I wake up early, tend to my garden, talk to the neighbors, and walk on the sand. In the afternoons, I sometimes take on some online consulting work for engineers who need an experienced opinion. It's not for the money. My pension supports me just fine. It's because I like to keep my mind active. I've made new friends here, good people, real people. Mr. Joe, a retired fisherman who lives 2 houses down. Ms. Hattie, who sells sweet corn at the beach every Saturday and always saves the warmest ones for me. The folks at the little market who already know I like my coffee beans roasted fresh. No one here knows my history with Tyson. No one needs to. I'm just Elias, the engineer who retired and came to find peace on the coast. The lawsuit Tyson tried to bring against me was dismissed a month ago. The judge didn't even let it move forward. The evidence was irrefutable. The disinheritance stood. Atticus called me to give me the news, and I just thanked him. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel revenge. I felt nothing. And I realized that was exactly what I needed to feel. Nothing. Because when you feel nothing about a situation, it's because it no longer has power over you. Tyson tried to contact me a few more times after that. He sent a certified letter that I returned unopened. He even showed up at my door here in South Carolina once. I don't know how he found my address. I saw him through the gate. He was thin, with dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled. I didn't open the door. I simply said through the window, "I have nothing to say to you. Go away." He stayed there for about 20 minutes, pleading. I closed the curtain and turned on the radio. Eventually, he left. He never came back. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had to go back to renting a simple place, sharing it with 2 other people, that he finally got a steady job at a small firm earning a basic salary, that all his friends had disappeared, and that he is paying off his debts little by little with a lot of sacrifice. A part of me, a small part, that tiny piece that still remembers the baby he once was, feels pity. But the larger part, the part that was insulted, used, and disrespected, knows that this is the only way he will ever learn. No one learns the easy way when they've spent their whole life being served everything on a silver platter. I reflect a lot on the mistakes I made as a father. I gave too much and demanded too little. I confused love with material provision. I thought my financial presence would make up for my physical absence in his early years. And when Lorraine died and he became my only family, I clung to the idea of being necessary to him, even if it meant being used. The truth I learned, and perhaps too late, is that raising a child isn't about giving them everything they want. It's about teaching them to earn what they need. It's not about protecting them from every fall. It's about teaching them how to get back up. It's not about being a bank. It's about being an example. If I could go back in time, I would have said no more often. I would have let Tyson face consequences sooner. I would have been less of a provider and more of a presence. But you can't go back. You can only move forward with the lessons you've learned. Today, I live with little, but I have something I haven't had in years: dignity, peace, and self-respect. I wake up without emotional debts, without silent demands, and without the feeling of being exploited. I am the master of my life again. And if there is one message I want to leave for whoever is listening, it is this: do not confuse love with submission. Do not confuse being a good parent with being a doormat. Your children need love, yes, but they also need boundaries and consequences. They need to learn that the world does not revolve around them, and if one day, God forbid, your son or daughter looks at you and wishes for your death in exchange for an inheritance, know that you have every right to walk away. Because a family that does not respect you does not deserve your presence. And blood does not justify abuse. I chose my peace, and it was the best choice I ever made. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story. If this touched you in any way, please take care of your own heart and remember that it is never too late to start over. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.